We're opening up our country. Should have never been closed. Should have never been closed.
We want to reopen the government, but we have a responsibility to make sure that we extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
Leadership of the Democratic Party in many respects is way out of touch with where Democrats in general are.
The disruption was really for nothing. We could have avoided all this, but it was pure politics.
Well, it looks like the government shutdown is coming to an end. Next step is the House. Politico writes it this way. The House is coming back into session to end the shutdown after more than 50 days in recess. Republicans appear ready to support the bill. It's less clear how many Democrats will break ranks in support of the bipartisan deal brokered in the Senate. Most members of the minority party are irate to be caving without a deal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. That's where it stands. Let's bring in our panel. Start there. Fox News contributor Byron York, Meredith McGraw, White House reporter for The Wall Street Journal, and Josh Holmes, co-host of the Ruthless podcast, former chief of staff to Senator Mitch McConnell. You know, Josh, Jimmy Fallon, who, you know, occasionally we quote on this network, put out, pro tip, if you're going to call it the Republican shutdown, you're not supposed to get mad that it's ending. Yeah. It's really interesting to watch some of the reaction.
Some tough mixed messages there from the Democratic Party. It's emblematic of the larger civil war that they have. I rarely agree with Bernie Sanders, but I think he's hit the nail on the head, and that his party leadership is way out of touch with the Democratic Party at this point. This was never about Obamacare tax credits in the least. It was about Chuck Schumer's political standing, both as a party leader in the Senate and his own Senate seat in New York. And he felt the left wing coming after March when they passed a CR. He felt like he needed to shut it down without a strategy or without a real plan whatsoever to get out from underneath it. And what's resulted is a 41-day shutdown that, of course, there's going to have to be some breaking of ranks. And where that's left the Democratic Party is entirely shattered in this ideological battle that they're having that I think continues for quite some time.
Yeah, Meredith, you know, the media, a lot of analysts jumping on Chuck Schumer today and yesterday. Take a listen.
I think the word of the day is terrible, 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 terrible. To quote another Charles Barkley when it comes to Chuck Schumer, look at this, least popular Dem Senate leader ever.
Chuck Schumer, his days are over. If he cannot keep his caucus together, he needs to go.
Senator Schumer's been there since 1982. My guess is that he won't be leader of the party in 2027.
Congressman Ro Khanna from California tweeting out, Schumer may have voted no, but people are tired of the D.C. dance. 8 senators admit they kept him in the loop. 8 senators that voted yes are not up for re-election. His number 2 voted yes. We need a new politics with new faces for working people. I mean, are the chances that Senator Schumer is running for re-election diminishing by the day here?
Well, I certainly think that Senator Schumer is in hot water with his party. They've made clear that they felt like they had the winds at their back, especially after Tuesday night's election last week. And they really hoped that a lot of Democrats would hold the line against President Trump and some of his squeeze tactics here in the end. But I do think some Senate Democrats are still looking ahead to next week or to next month when that health care vote will happen, and they'll get Democrats and Republicans on the record as to where they stand with extending these healthcare subsidies, and Republicans will have to come forward with a plan of their own. And Republicans, we know, don't have the best polling when it comes to that issue.
No, that is true. Just quickly on the government shutdown, Byron, if you look at the impact, the government shutdown economic impact that's estimated down growth of 1.5% in the fourth quarter based on this shutdown, and $11 billion in permanent loss. Then you look at the air traffic control delays and cancellations that continue today. The weather obviously around the country didn't help that, but you've got some serious problems out there flying.
And as we speak, you have large majorities of the Democratic Party in the House and the Senate who are angry about stopping the shutdown. It's unclear what their end strategy was, how far they wanted it to go, 80 days, 120 days. I don't know, but we do know that Democratic recriminations have now extended to the point where they're arguing with each other over why they shut the government down in the first place. Was it really about those subsidies? Did they just want to show that they could stand up for Trump, but they needed an issue to hang that on? They don't even agree on why they did what they did.
Right. And to that point, Josh, here's the House Speaker not really committing.
Guarantee whatever the bill passes the Senate on ACA, you'll give it a vote in the House?
Look, we're going to do in the House what we always do, and that is a deliberative process. I do not guarantee the outcome of legislation or dates or deadlines or anything.
So basically, that's a no. They're not going to commit to anything.
Yeah, I mean, the discussion was between Majority Leader Thune and those Senate Democrats about a vote in the Senate, and I'm absolutely confident that Senator Thune will give them that opportunity. But look, as it goes to Chuck Schumer, when you're a party leader, and I know this, I mean, I spent a lot of time up there. When you're a party leader and you mortgage the leadership component of your job to try to chase the profile and the appreciation of an ideologically extreme element of your party, you will soon have neither the leadership nor the approval of anybody in your party. And I think Chuck Schumer is going to find that out. This isn't a deal. This isn't some pact. And you can see that from Speaker Johnson. There's no guarantee that ACA subsidies go anywhere. And I think that's going to be the end result of all of this.
And Meredith, we talk about this. You know, that these subsidies were put in during COVID. They were meant to expire. Democrats voted for them to expire. They were never permanent. Also, they were structured to help the cost because the Obamacare exchanges did not bring the cost of health care down. But to your point, Republicans don't really have an answer on the cost health care issue. Here's the president on Trump Care, or whatever he's going to call it.
I want, instead of going to the insurance companies, I want the money to go into an account for people where the people buy their own health insurance. It's so good. The insurance will be better. It'll cost less. If we did that, that would be so exciting. Call it Trump Care, call it whatever you want to call it, but anything but Obamacare. Obamacare is a disaster.
And in your paper, the headline, healthcare stocks drop after Trump says ACA funds should go public. So, you know, there is a question here about the way forward.
It's very true that President Trump is no fan of Obamacare. It's something that he tried to get rid of in his first term, and he has, you know, he's at every term made public that he's not a fan of this. But it's also true that we haven't seen any sort of clear path forward from Republicans, and I think that's really going to be put to the test here, and it's going to be a real test forward for the president as well.
Byron, last word.
Well, during the shutdown, we did have some polling that a large number of people supported the subsidies. Democrats made a mistake in thinking they would then support shutting down the government because of it. But now that the government's going to be reopened again, I would not be surprised if there is some sort of deal to extend some sort of slimmed down subsidies, but just not cut them off altogether on December 31st.
That's a good bet. All right, panel, stand by if you would.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.